I've been talking a lot about the tanks changes and how I'm not a big fan of it. You know, I agree that a tank should not be able to solo content, but a tank should be, you know, a nearly invincible ball of death. That's what a tank is supposed to be. We shouldn't be pulling big numbers in DPS. We shouldn't be, you know, out healing the entire raid, but we should be able to survive. That's what being a tank is all about, and Blizzard wants to take that away. What the fuck is happening? Why is Blizzard destroying tanks? That's what Marcellian says. Let's see why Blizzard is doing this.
Blizzard has destroyed tanks in the War Within. You will wait forever now to find one for your group. Nobody will want to tank in dungeons again. And more than this, healers were accomplices to this act. So what do? Well, the first thing is to get a YouTube channel and make a clickbaity video after everyone else already covered the subject, so people will lose their shit because the community is overreacting.
There it is.
So Flame, were tanks not destroyed? Well, I mean, not all of them, but the ones that are destroyed, are they dead now? Well, yeah, but it's too early to tell because... Wait, so the tanks are fine and we can just play and have fun? Well, I mean, it depends since... Wait, so you have no idea what's going on, do you? Well, no. But neither does Blizzard, so this cancels it out because that's
Blizzard
how
not knowing
things
what's
work.
Jokes
Jokes aside, the recent tank nerfs
It's a common theme. They don't know what's going on with the patch. They don't know what's going on with tanks. It sounds about right.
Have caught way more fire than expected, and for good reason. We didn't think we would have to make a video on it, considering a lot of people like Max, Stratnos, Quasi, and more already did, and we already had a full stream testing and discussing all the changes. Speaking of, you should definitely check it out. Twitch.tv/MarcellianOnline is where we stream and also where we discuss things like nerfing tanks in our weekly show where Marcellian also shows up. Except that
you've noticed you've been playing, you know, as tanks are tissue paper. Yeah, look, it's happening because Blizzard said they were going to try to also nerf the hits that tanks take, right? They wanted there to be less spike damage, basically one-shot kills, because right now a tank can survive it. With these changes, no, they're just going to get one-shotted. So I think tanks are kind of taking it pretty hard right now.
Last week when he didn't, but we still covered the tanks, healers, DPS, how to choose your main and more, all while doing dungeons and raids with you, the viewer, and you don't want to miss out on that. And even after we streamed and everyone has made videos on it, people still come and ask questions, which speaks to the degree of this change. To keep it short, and you can read the whole article from the link in the description, the devs want to reduce the strength of tanks, being able to take care of themselves and not rely on healers, so as to make healers have to take care of tanks more, at the same time making sure the tank damage intake does not spike their HP bar, all while making sure we don't create another kite meta where basically tanks do some damage then run away from the mobs because
I hate kiting. It's such a like not fun mechanic to play through, and it makes you feel like a little bitch, to be honest. You're a tank, you're wearing all plate armor, and you're running away constantly just trying to CC shit. And by the way, needing a healer, that's fine. You want us to need healers, but at the end of the day, you know why this is happening? It's because of delves. It's because of delves, because everybody knows that tanks were just destroying delves, basically, going through it, not having to worry about a lot of things that other people have to worry about, because they can just survive through basically anything in the delve. And Blizzard didn't like that, so they're doing the changes, and it's going to affect rating, it's going to affect Mythic Plus. It's not good. I don't like it. I don't like it. I play tank to be able to survive, and I can't survive anymore.
They would die in 3 seconds.
Limp noodle.
All while making sure that healer gameplay will not be dominated by tank healing and instead be more balanced, consistent. This philosophy is good and likely most people agree it would be better for the game.
So then why the backlash?
Well, saying that Blizzard has no idea what's going on is a bit harsh and outrage-inducing, but it's hard not to come to this conclusion when only 2 years ago we had a blue post going into the first season of Dragonflight where they essentially said, and I quote, "Through our recent testing, we've determined that the damage done to tanks needs to be increased. While we're thrilled that players are enjoying playing tanks in Dragonflight and want the role to be healthy, there are some negative effects that can come from tanks being too strong that we want to avoid. We want healers to play a key role in keeping tanks alive, and tanks shouldn't be able to easily solo large portions of encounters after the rest of their group have died. Now, if your computer
Look, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think it's okay for players to need each other in an MMO. That's fine. Tanks need healers. Tanks need DPS. To make a group to do content. Okay, that's fine. I don't mind it. But yes, they totally went in the other direction because they just recently increased damage that all tanks tank. But right, we just read that post. Tanks were getting bitch slapped by things, and you have to damage mitigate and heal through it to be able to survive. And now they're going in the opposite direction where they're like, maybe we reduce the damage but make tanks more squishy. So you got to make up your mind. You got to decide what you want to do, because at this point, tanks are squishy and the damage is still high, and you're just going to get us one-shotted. And by the way, the need for healers and DPS still existed before this. I understand, like, probably the greatest tanks around could pull some decent DPS numbers, and they could solo content. But most people, if you're a tank, you can't solo a lot of things because you're just never going to kill things. It's going to take you hours to get anything killed. Yeah, you can survive, but you're never going to kill things. So you need the DPS with you. And when you bring the DPS with you, those DPS are going to need a healer. So at the end of the day, you still needed a group. It just, maybe you weren't afraid of dying, but you needed groups to complete content. So I just don't feel like this change was necessary.
Had access to the internet for the last 2 years,
or at least to this extent. If they wanted to reduce things a little bit, that's fine. But they wouldn't. They reduced resources. They reduced damage mitigation. They reduced healing. I mean, it's across the board, just a bitch slap.
May have noticed that the total opposite has happened in Dragonflight, where tanks were almost 100% self-sufficient. So it begs the question, The nerfs to some of the tanks have essentially created the problems they said they didn't want. Tank damage was spikier, tanks had to kite, and tanks felt like their sustain meant nothing, so healers had to dump most of their healing into tanks. The main problem with this are the encounters, dungeon mechanics, boss abilities, the number of casts that cannot be interrupted, all contribute to massive damage intake by the players, so all the changes and philosophy seem to have been contradictory.
Yes.
But there are some good changes as well, and I think it is important to mention them. First of all, Brewmaster has probably the best change so far and likely the closest tank to what the philosophy of the devs is dictating at the moment. Self-heal from your spheres and Celestial Brew has been seriously nerfed. Maybe a bit too much, to the point where it feels like I don't really care if I press my Celestial Brew or collect my spheres. Maybe.
So it's irrelevant
But
now?
in the process, armor and, more importantly, stagger has been buffed across the board. What this all means is that Brewmaster takes less damage and as
as a blood DK, I understand what he's saying about this, but blood DKs, they nerfed our healing and increased our bone shield. So they're taking away the basically what made blood DKs unique, and that their survivability was through their insane heals. They no longer have. They're basically like a warrior. They're like a new flavor of warrior now. You got your bone shield, so you're just gonna be able to take hits harder, but your healing kind of isn't that great. It sucks, man. It takes away the fantasy of a blood DK, which I love.
consequence, less spiky damage, but also cannot resolve the damage on its own since the self-healing has been nerfed, aka the healer needs to be in charge of the tank's survivability way more. Similar things have happened to Bear and Warrior, where their self-heal has been nerfed, but they are still tanky enough to not have spiky damage sometimes. I say sometimes because we go back to encounter design where certain non-tank buster mechanics still hurt, but Warrior has had shield wall buffed to be accessible when that happens, but with the nerfs to impending victory and ignore pain, you will need the healer to move your HP bar back. Once again, some of these nerfs seem a bit too harsh, like Indomitable healing for nothing and ignore pain barely covering a small percentage of your HP bar, where they are now unreliable and mostly add trickles of effective health points over the course of a fight, kind of like every little bit helps. This may be healthier for the game, but it sure as hell feels boring and unimpactful to play these spells and passives. But maybe that's just a tuning issue.
Maybe it's a tuning issue, but I definitely hope these things change, because one of the best things about playing tank is how reactionary it is, right? You're constantly like reacting to things, or even like preemptively reacting, knowing when you're going to get hit by certain things. And if clicking those buttons matters less, then it's less fun to play. If you're that dependent on the healer, that whether or not you decided to damage mitigate at the right time or not, it doesn't matter. That's going to suck. That's going to suck. There's still tuning to be done with this for sure. But right now, as it currently stands, it's a complete crapshoot.
On the opposite side of the spectrum, the changes to Prot Paladin seemed really contradictory. The mastery was nerfed by a large amount, the armor gain from Shield of the Righteous has been reduced, the spell block chance reduced, among other things. This means that over the course of a fight, Paladins take more damage from all sources, consistent but also bursty. On top of it, its defensives have also been nerfed with a reduction in duration to Sentinel and Eye of Tyr, but also the cooldown reduction gained from Righteous Protector. This makes Paladin have fewer and shorter defensive cooldowns while also taking overall more damage. However,
Right.
Word of Glory has been buffed so that Paladins can heal themselves more, but
What?
isn't the philosophy the exact opposite? Take less bursty damage but put more healing agency in the hands of the healer and not the tank? As a result, Prot Paladin is close to unplayable on beta at the moment.
Damn.
I say close because it can still clear content, but from my experience, if one cast isn't interrupted, if one enrage isn't soothed, if Shield of the Righteous drops for even a second, if you miss your Word of Glory, if you step out of Consecrate for a second too long, because every single mob and pack in the dungeon forces you to move also very often, then you die in a very short amount of time, too short for the healer to be able to prevent it.
Yeah.
This means that the skill
This pendulum has swung way too far in the other direction. They need to bring it back a little bit. That's ridiculous. That amount of ways to die, that amount of ways to get one shot, and a one shot is you can't recover from it. The group's gonna wipe. That's crazy.
cap for Paladin has risen.
This was the exact opposite theory of what they wanted in raiding, and they talked about that. Back when we had a Sepulchre of the first ones where we had like 30 different mechanics throughout the raid that could one-shot an entire raid, they said themselves, they're like, that's not fun. It's not fun to have one mistake cause a one-shot of the raid. And so they changed it. The raiding philosophy for Dragonflight was much better. But now they're doing the same thing in dungeons. They're going back to the one-shot kills.
To insane levels where
That's
only the
garbage.
best paladins can make the tank work. Work, by the way, not make it amazing, but make it fundamentally function. Which means if you are a more casual player, you'll have a drastically harder time to actually feel like what the devs want for the tanks applies to you as well. Once again, these are tuning issues that can change by the time the expansion
He's dead.
launches, which is way too soon for these to happen right now, but it's important to point out the dissonance between the chosen tuning and actual philosophy. And we get to Blood Death Knight. Over the years,
Oh,
I
God.
have said it multiple times, and probably other people have also mentioned this, that Blood Death Knight design contradicts encounter design, and that it will either be an overpowered tank or a subpar tank,
Yeah.
with no real in between. You will either be able
I
to
love the fantasy of Blood DK. That's why I love playing it so much. You're like this unkillable, this thing with like constant energy. You know, you're never depleted. Now you deplete on runes and stuff, but like in terms of fantasy wise, you know, you don't build up with lactic acid in your muscle. That's how a Death Knight is. So you could just keep going. You're just this machine that never stops, and you're sucking the blood out of your enemies, constantly healing. That's what's cool about playing a Blood DK. That's the healing. And now it's fucked.
to solo tank Farak while no other tank comes even close or be a liability in raids.
I've done that,
This has
solo tank
always made
Farak
it
a little bit,
difficult, I imagine, for the devs to properly balance the tank, but I think they have finally found the tuning knob to make it better, and it's what people are up in arms about, and that is Death Strike. Death Strike now will only calculate the amount of healing it does based off of the damage you take in the last 5 seconds once. Meaning that if you take a tank buster and Death Strike after it, you heal for a lot. But if you Death Strike again within the same 5 seconds window, the tank buster's damage will not be calculated again in your healing
DKs
received.
are just
This
masochists.
makes double
Yeah, so this spamming blood strike, basically taking your health from 5% back up, it's not going to happen anymore.
or triple dipping Death Strikes back to back prevent insane
That was a
amounts of
great feeling.
HPS and being able to heal your HP bar 3 times over. This is
Yeah.
a healthier change where each Death Strike helps mitigate a damage event once, but more in line with how the rest of the tank's mitigation works. The change also promotes correct play for Blood, since consecutive Death Strikes are theoretically an incorrect way to do your rotation. theoretically.
Sure.
But this also means that the amount of damage you heal back will be limited and never be 100% or more, which mathematically means that the rest of it needs to be healed by a healer. All of this is great on
Look how
paper.
much this guy's doing. 1 million. He's healing for 1 million. You guys can't see it in the chat. Oh man, it's sad. It's sad because those days are gone for sure.
But the way it will function in practice remains to be seen. I tested Blood on beta and I felt way tankier than most other tanks. Definitely way more than Paladin, but of course not way tankier than Blood before the nerfs. And we are analyzing these in a Mythic Plus scenario, a consistently scaling content that will inevitably reach a point where all damage is spiky, because that's how infinitely scaling content works, because that's how math works. If the number gets bigger every time, at one point it will turn from consistent damage into burst damage. So the real question is, when should that happen? Should that happen in a +7, +10, +20? That is the real and only question I think actually matters. This is a matter of dev tuning and, more than anything, encounter tuning. Wherever this barrier lies.
That's where this whole change is still lacking. I think they made the changes on the tanks, but they have not fixed the encounters to match this change. So these encounters are still going to beat the ever-living shit out of you, but now you can't take those hits like you used to. That's a problem. Perhaps they're trying to make a mastery after stat for blood decay. They are increasing stats. We did see there's a stamina increase across the board. I just think they're trying to make tanks more about holding aggro, and that's your job. You hold aggro. If you die, the healer isn't healing you properly. If you're not killing things, the DPS isn't DPSing properly. But your job as a tank is not to be this self-sustained ball of death. It's just to hold aggro.
Past
and avoid
that
some
point,
mechanics.
any complaint about needing to kite or healing being too bursty is irrelevant. However, when the entirety of the beta testing cycle, this situation has happened at all key levels, people will understandably be upset. The counter argument that you may have is that on beta, our eye level is scaled down to heroic dungeon eye level for the lower keys, all the way up to heroic raid eye level in +10s. Even so, comparing to Dragonflight numbers, we have played these key levels in Season 4 with the same relative eye level across the season scaling, and the tuning was not this harsh. So it all feels disconnected. It all feels contradictory, and it's hard for people to understand where the bar is, standard is supposed to be, when the class tuning and encounter tuning seem to be handled by separate teams that do not communicate with each other or to us, the player base. It feels especially disconnected when they actually base these changes on what I and likely other people consider false premises. One such premise is that the tanks are so self-sufficient in Dragonflight that people don't need healers to heal tanks,
I don't get where this
or
came
do
from.
dungeons with
Like
no
what is this? Like a top? Did Method do this once or something? Blizzard saw it and now they're assuming everybody does this shit. I've never done a dungeon without a healer. Well, what the hell? How is that? I understand like that maybe the most epically geared out best parser in the game can do it, but why are we basing changes based on what that guy can do? What the hell? Oh man.
Healers at all. Hence why healer
no faith
agency
in
is
Blizzard to get
low,
this right.
and increasing the damage tanks take will prevent these scenarios. I'm sorry, who is playing with no healers? MDI players? High key pushers in very specific team comps and very specific dungeons with very specific affixes?
Yep.
Those are your bases for tuning? What about us, man? What about our friends? We cannot play without a healer. So why should we get punished because of a couple of exceptional players? And on another note, if a couple of players can actually achieve this in very specific situations, shouldn't they be allowed to do it? Rewarded for it? Isn't that what games are about? Finding ways to clear them with easy, fun, exceptional methods that make things interesting? The top players in the game will always find ways to break the game, no matter how much you nerf tanks. What this does is create a trickle-down effect to the majority of the player base because they just aren't skilled enough. I mean,
that's what
fair
I'm worried
game, man.
about.
If your goal is to make the game harder, that's fine. Nobody can say you can't. It's your game in the end. But if Dragonflight proved anything, it's that when you make it easier, more accessible, more players play it, and everyone, I think, finds it more fun.
Yes, exactly. He's totally right about that. Easier gameplay is has made the game more accessible across Dragonflight. Shadowlands was peak hardness, man. That was the craziest. Those are some of the craziest raid mechanics we've ever had to deal with, and people didn't want to raid. That's the truth. Did the freaking top end players? It was the longest race to world first. Did they enjoy that shit? Of course, they probably did. But the rest of the community, no. We just ate shit. Think about all the times the healer has died, and we still get the kill on the boss. Yeah, because I'm tanking, of course. Of course, we're still gonna get the kill. I'm a badass, you know. That's what I'm gonna do. But I think to nerf tanks across the board because I was able to kill Farak with 5% left by myself. That epic moment. Those are cool things. Or Razageth. You guys remember when with the two tanks? It was a Cadence and I soloed Razageth down at the very end. I think it was like 8%. We got her down. Yeah, those moments are going to happen if the play is like top tier, right? If the person's doing everything right. But you're going to change and nerf the entire game because those moments happen. By the way, we didn't do that without a healer. We didn't do that without DPS. Everybody had to be there for us to get the kill. It was just like that last little bit where a heroic moment needs to happen. That's what we got. At the end of the day, that shit's still not soloable. Which is the reason Blizzard has essentially stated that why they're making these changes, because they don't want things to be done without healers. That's ridiculous. Because
Or
because 0.01% was able to pull that off.
most of us anyway. The second false premise that maybe some
Sam,
people
you aren't
will
skilled
argue
enough
is
in
that
that.
healers want to be in charge of a tank's survivability, or at least that's how it sounds when the devs say, we want to reinforce the importance of the healer role and work towards gameplay where tanks and healers collaborate to reduce the damage the tank is taking and to restore the tank's lost health. Collaborating is fun, but if the agency of tank survivability leans heavier on healers, then encounter design has to change and follow suit. Fewer Shadow Bolts fixated on DPS players, less dangerous AoE rot, fewer dispels towards DPS players again. But that's boring because what that will do, as pointed out by Dratnos, is turn the game into classic WoW, where the tank will die if the healer starts doing other stuff.
Yeah.
And that's really boring, for tanks at least, but maybe it's not for you. Maybe this is more fun, and the
Maybe
purpose of
healers are
these
gonna like
changes
this.
is to make the game more fun. As a tank player myself, I can 100% sure say that I find it more fun when I can take care of myself when
Yeah.
shit happens.
Same.
To free up my healer to take care of my party. And losing the tools to prevent my death because I have fewer of them or they make less of a difference is not enjoyable.
Exactly.
But as a healer, being solely
Making the buttons clickable for no reason, basically. You click the buttons, you damage mitigate, you do everything right, and you still die because the healer decided to take a dingleberry out his butthole at the same time. Yeah, that sucks. It just makes your gameplay feel less significant. It makes the rotation feel less significant, and it just makes you feel, like I said, like an aggro stick. That's all you are. You can't really do anything.
responsible for all of my party's members' health bars going back up is very satisfying. But then don't
It
make
makes taking less fun, and it makes healing tougher, I think. The healers, man, there's already none of them playing this game. There's still people who play this game and heal. Sure ain't gonna be after this.
me have to deal damage, do double dispels every 8 seconds, handle affix crowd controls, dispels or dislocation, filling up my plate with all
There's
of
a
this
middle ground for sure.
non-healer
Blizzard just can't find it. Yeah, I just don't know if I have faith in them to find it. That's the problem. I think they keep swinging the pendulum back and forth, and they keep missing the mark.
gameplay. Once again, encounter design. So which is it? Which way we going, Chief? Because it's looking like it's everywhere and nowhere in the end.
Yeah.
Hard underline on looking like, because looking like is the best opinion we can have when we don't have the full picture, but we are supposed to feedback it with the full picture in mind. Everyone finds different things fun. Although not 100% indicative of the entire community's opinion, we already asked people what their ideal tanking gameplay should be, and a resounding interest towards a balance of self-sufficiency and healer reliance was obvious. Hitting the middle mark is way harder than hitting the extremes. But even if we want to hit extremes, it's very obvious more people like to be in control of their fate.
This is probably the right choice. I'll be honest, though, man. I mean, this is more fun. This is more fun. Definitely, this is what they went with. So I don't get it. Hold on. Oh, this is a Mercelian survey. I thought WoW took this survey. So basically, Blizzard went with the least, choices here. Need healer always. That's the choice that Blizzard went with. Okay.
rather than leaving it
9%.
to someone else. And bears. Similarly, we asked opinions on healing. The question was asked around DPSing, a very non-healer thing to do, but we can extend it to other non-healer responsibilities that have cropped up over the years. Obviously, healers want to heal. That's what they are there for. That's what they signed up for. And once again, presumably they want to be in charge of the tank's health. I cannot say survivability because survivability agency has to be, like the dev said, a collaboration between the player's use of defensives and proper mechanical play with the healer's ability to move their health bar in a reliable, non-bursty way, as shown by a poll asking about burst versus consistent versus a balanced style of healing. It's definitely hard to make everyone happy.
I feel bad for healers because they've been on the spot, man. I mean, now they're gonna have to heal the tanks too, which was at least one thing they didn't have to worry about. I mean, you guys saw yesterday's run. Moishi was just bitching about how he thought he had to heal me. He thought wrong. I could have healed myself, but he was bitching about it. And then he has to dispel things. He has to interrupt it. Like the Mythic Plus mechanics and Raid mechanics a lot of times require healers to do things outside of healing. Now you're going to put the tank on their asses too? Oh, man. Let me tell you. The healer population is going to decrease.
Sorry, scratch that. Not
Again.
hard. Impossible. But it's even harder or impossibler by moving away from things that people enjoy, and I definitely think this cannot be achieved just by the class tuning team. Encounters dictate who dies, who needs healing, how hard defensives have to be, how much you have to kite, and so on. And until these sides of the game work practically or at least empirically together, these types of community backlashes will always happen.
Yeah,
I think
it's wild hearing you say this. That's basically how it was. Yeah, Vanilla and Cataclysm. I don't agree, Dadrick, but the game, as it's currently built, is not built for that anymore. With all the extra things that healers have to do, and then you're going to put the tank on top of them too. No, it's the old game style, the old gameplay was much more simple. It was a simpler way to play the game. Everything was more visually simpler. Mechanics were more simple. Like all of it just was easy to kind of identify and figure out. Now, I mean, you gotta run away from this shit, interrupt that shit, CC that shit, understand what's about to happen here and there, get away from that ground shit, face that cone this way. It's way more complicated now. And I think that added bloat, one way Blizzard kind of countered it is they were like, okay, tanks can be more self-sufficient, so healers can focus on other things because right now we're giving them a lot of things to focus on. If they want to do these changes, I don't have a problem with it. But they need to make some changes in game, not just to the player character. They need to change some mechanics up and shit, because the way it's currently stands, it's not going to work.
I think the end goal is good. Tanks should be tanks and not tanks and healers. Healers should be healers and not healers and DPS. And DPS can suck on an onion because they complain the most. We just need to have the direction towards these goals be good as well, as good as playing an easy or hard melee DPS. But which is which? Thankfully, we have a video on it right here.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. As somebody who plays Blood DK, I'm just not a fan. And like I said, you could do the changes, that's fine, but there's got to be changes on the back end too. Some of these mechanics just don't work as they currently stand. The hits that you can take in high mythic keys, it's not going to work. And yes, Deadric, kind of the way you're describing it is it separated the good healers from the bad. That's fine. I think these changes, the problem with it is they are really focused on that top 1%. And I don't think that's ever a changed philosophy or a game philosophy that Blizzard should take. Creating a game for the top 1% or centered around the top 1% is not healthy for the game.